I have a, my pride and joy is an old Nikon F3,
Yeah.
and I've still got it in all the lenses, but I don't even know where you can buy real film anymore.
Or get it processed. That's the problem. But my first one was no Yashica, and I shot it until literally the floor plate fell off of it. And I just wore it out.
Really?
It just fell apart. So I got my use out of that for sure.
What are you using now?
That's a 5D Mark III Canon. It's a full frame. I may go up and get the 4 tax purposes. I can write it off on taxes. My accountant this year said, you need to buy something. I went, I can do that.
Yeah. And I know what it's going to be.
Yeah, because what I make doing this, I have to offset it with buying stuff or traveling.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
We're going to start in just a moment if everyone wants to start pulling into seats. And apparently,
you know, I'm going to mention where this report is on the website. Since it won't pick up on it.
No.
Yes, it's barely on.
Have you framed yours yet?
Is it on the government page? On the
It was so enlightening. Yes. There are many perks.
council, will everyone check your mics? Let's turn them all on and make sure we're not feeding back.
check.
Check.
Yes.
You good? Harry, is yours good?
Yes.
Check.
All right.
Amy's good.
I assume, Mike, you're not going to let your people sit down?
Susanna, check yours again.
Hello.
All right, we call to order the March 11, 2019 meeting of the Signal Mountain Town Council. We'll begin with the pledge, and we'll have a moment of silence for our invocation tonight. We'll stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have a seat. Carol, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Amy Speak is absent. Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here?
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Spaulding is absent. Mayor Dan Landrum.
Here. We're going to take a look at the minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to take a look at them. Does anyone have any comments?
No.
Need more time? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries 3-0. Is it okay that we did them all at once?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, we have a couple of presentations tonight, and we're going to start with Mike Williams, so if you'll come to that microphone.
As you know, we've been working on our state accreditation for about 4 years now, actually longer than that, but officially full-time, having somebody working on it. A couple of months ago now, or actually about a month ago, we met all of our standards and have been awarded our state accreditation. And Rex Barton from the Chiefs Association and the Coalition for the Accreditation, State Accreditation is here to make the presentation, so I'll let him explain what it is.
Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come here tonight and recognize Chief Williams and the men and women of the Signal Mountain Police Department. Again, my name is Rex Barton. I'm a police management consultant with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service. Here tonight I'm representing myself at MTAS, but also the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police and the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. I had the good fortune of being on being a part of the startup of this program. And the chief just told me, he said, this is really a big deal for me. And I am tickled that it is, because it's been a big deal for me over the last 10 years being involved in this program. And I'm tickled that folks are honored by being a part of it. A lot of folks may not know a lot about accreditation programs. Most all of you have heard of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which accredits colleges and high schools, and I'm pretty sure that the schools up here on the mountain are probably accredited by SACS. It's the same sort of process for law enforcement, a set of professional standards that recognize excellence and that provide for excellence that we ask police departments to meet. It's all voluntary, nobody has to join, but if they do join, there's some benefits that come along with it. You all pass a budget every year. Starting this next year, your police, actually starting this year, proactive, your police department will receive a discount from what used to be called the TML Risk Management Pool. It's now Public Entity Partners. You're going to get a discount on your law enforcement insurance. The reason that you are has been shown, and the Risk Management Pool believes wholeheartedly that departments that meet nationally and national and state standards don't get sued as often. And when they do get sued, we win a lot more often because people conduct law enforcement agencies conduct their affairs in a more professional manner. So the ultimate goal of accreditation is to improve and enhance the quality of the service that the police department provides its community. And the second most important part of that is to understand that this is not a one-time thing. The police department is going to continue over the next 3 years to do the same sorts of things they have for the last 4 to remain accredited. Best way to describe that is we have 160 standards. They have to create written directives, whether they want to call them policies, general orders, whatever you want to call that, to guide the men and women to explain to them what's expected of them. Pursuit, emergency vehicle operation, use of force, search and seizure. And there's an old phrase that we use sometimes that policy tells us what we say we're going to do, but you can say you're going to do it all day long. Part of the process of accreditation is you have to offer proof that you do in fact do what you said you were going to do. So for the last 3 years, the police department has been developing those proofs, putting them in files for assessors to come look at. Over the next 3 years, they're going to continue to do so. I can't tell you how proud I am of Chief Williams, the accreditation manager, Troy Kennedy, and every single member of this police department. I want to point out one more thing. This is the second smallest police department in Tennessee to achieve accreditation. That, folks, is big. It does 2 things. One is it's a great credit to these folks, but they've set a bar for other small police departments. Just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be really, really good. And that's one of the reasons I'm particularly proud of these guys. So, Chief, if you would come up, I'd like to present to you with this plaque, if I can bear with me to read this. The Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, be it hereby known that the Signal Mountain Police Department, having fully demonstrated its commitment to professional law enforcement by recognizing their responsibility to their community and the citizens they serve and protect, and having embodied the best professional practices with integrity and by proving their compliance with the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police and its Board of Directors does hereby award this Certificate of Meritorious Accreditation effective the 6th day of February 2019 and is recognized as an accredited law enforcement agency for a period of 3 years. Chief.
Just like what he said earlier, Troy Kennedy has been the workhorse on all this as far as the paperwork, and everything's online now, and all of our policies and procedures. But every single person standing over there's had something to do with this, and also Mr. Veal, because he's the one that started it even before I came up here. But we just really grabbed it and ran with it when I found out Troy could do it. So he shouldn't have ever let me know that he was into that kind of thing. But several of these officers wrote some of the policies. They've taken it on themselves to take over different parts of the department as far as training, traffic investigation, our radar, LiDAR instructors, and just having ownership in the department. So a lot of these policies they wrote, and then it was vetted through the state. All of our policies that we get are vetted through a law firm, through the state Chiefs Association. So by the time we get them, they've already been vetted. And then if we get, as new laws are passed or court rulings come through, they let us know that we need to change our policy, we do. So if I can only get them, I'll come up and get a picture with a few folks who come down with us, I'd appreciate it.
Hey, wait, before you do that, first, don't leave the microphone just yet.
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, it's wonderful that you've been recognized, but you're recognized every day by the people who live here. And we're all incredibly appreciative of the fact that we live in one of the safest places that you can live on the planet. Not just in Tennessee, but it's an amazing thing. It's because of that attention to detail. And being on the council, we also see, the paperwork and the monthly reports and everything that comes in. And we can always count on, what comes from the police department is detailed and clear and evident, and you would know if you weren't doing well. So, and we would see it as well.
Yes.
So it's great. And the lack of lawsuits is wonderful. Everybody would agree.
Absolutely.
It makes our job. Harry likes that.
Of course.
So how long have you been in law enforcement, Mike?
46 years, sir.
How many departments have you worked for?
Well, I started with Hamilton County back in '72 and worked there for about a year. And then I was making $595 a month, and I got a raise up to $800 to go to Red Bank and a take-home car, so I went and stayed 9 years there. Finally came to my senses and went to Chattanooga Police Department in '83, stayed 29 years. And I retired down there as deputy chief, and I stayed out for 3 years and just got the bug again. And when this came open, I really was excited for the opportunity and loved every day of it. And it's just so much different than what I came from down in Chattanooga. And the community support and everybody coming over and bringing cookies and cakes and stuff like that, even though I'm trying to keep them health conscious. And at Chattanooga, we would get stuff locked in the front, and you have to run it through a bomb detector before you bring it back. We actually eat it. Up here, we trust the folks to, and then the kids who come through want to do a tour of the police department, the fire department. It just makes our day when they want to come in and be with us. And that's our foundation for down the road, and we'll make them our friends early.
Look, we appreciate that in the course of a life, there's a point at which everyone has a peak, and we're glad you chose to have yours here with us.
I consider that just what you said, the peak of my career.
Thanks.
Guys, you want to come over right up here? Let's try
Put
to
your
stay
mics on mute.
right in this curve.
Put them
here.
on again. I don't know how much further I can move back. I'm working on getting out of this building. Go up there, get up there. Get up there. Crazy woman. No, get up there.
Everybody tighten in as close as you can. I know that. I got another real quick thing, if I could here.
Yes.
Introduce our new officer, Jennifer Sullivan.
Welcome.
She starts the academy March 31st. So she's one of the things that we've done now is with the money we've saved, not having to hire officers. and to send them to the academy every year. We haven't lost an officer in 3.5 years. Most departments, I think Rex would vouch for me, they go, wait, you did what? Because they lose them all the time. So we're very proud of that. And with that same budget, we're able to send our officers to instructor training and a variety of training schools. So we do all of our in-house. She did her taser in-house. She'll do her firearms in-house. She did pepper spray today. She did radar, LiDAR last week, all from instructors standing right over there that we don't have to send them out. So they can come back and train our officers. So she's got a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in criminal justice. So we're looking forward to getting her cranked up. She's coming to us from state probation and parole.
Welcome. Welcome to Signal.
The other thing I want to announce to you is Lieutenant Coulter's retiring Friday. So that left me a couple of positions to make a very difficult decision on my promotions. So Jane, you come over. She's the highest ranking female officer ever here at Signal Mountain. She's Lieutenant Jane Phipps now. And she will be going to midnight shift to start with. And her sergeant will be Sergeant Brandon Knowles. And very proud of both of them and excited to get them moving forward. And we'll get to do that again. Lieutenant Lewis, you want to come over real quick? Lieutenant Lewis is retiring in October after 25 years of honorable service. And as a result of when he leaves, there'll be some more folks that will move up and move around. So this whole year is going to be a big year of change for us. And if they can just keep on that legacy that Lieutenant Lewis has built over the years, we'll be in good shape.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to have a report. As everyone probably knows, that we've been looking at our water company, and this is the second great piece of work we've gotten from MTAS, and we appreciate that. So if you want to come to the microphone and introduce yourself, Brad. And let me make one statement for anybody who happens to be watching this live. If you go to the Signal Mountain website and look in the right-hand column, you can download the report. It's not going to show up on the YouTube live feed, but you can download the same report that you'll be referring to today.
All right, I got to say that's a hard act to follow right there. I did receive a ticket recently, not at Signal Mountain, okay?
It's not going to help
But
you.
it's the first ticket that I've had in 20-some years. And the only thing I remember is that the one I got 20-some years ago was on the same road that I got one recently. I guess I didn't learn my lesson, right? So thank you for allowing myself and Miss Sharon Rollins to come tonight and give a short presentation to you.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Brad Harris, and I'm a finance and accounting consultant for MTAS, Municipal Technical Advisory Service. I'm a CPA, and I've been with MTAS about 6 years now, done quite a number of these utility rate studies, and was involved in the previous study that we did some months ago with Hannah and Steve. And thank you for allowing us to come, and I know you have a lot of material in your a lot of things in your material, and I'm going to focus tonight on the PowerPoint. Now, we can get down in the details if you'd like with the spreadsheets and all. I don't mind doing that at all, but you just lead me where you would like to. But I think that we've got it pretty well summarized here for you. So with that, I'll get started. We were asked some months ago to prepare a multi-year financial analysis for the water department, and that involves looking at a number of years of history. And those numbers are not difficult. They come right off your audited financial statements. Then it gets a little more difficult when we start estimating the current year, because we're not at the end of that yet, and also going forward. So I'll explain that as I go, the criteria that I used going forward. And also you have to factor in things like your capital improvement program. What are you going to do going forward? And the town provided us a list of things for the next 5 or 6 years, and so I factored that in as well. It involves, of course, depreciation, right? We know that with a water department, we don't take the expense in a given year on a capital improvement, but we depreciate it over a number of years. So it has an impact for a long time to go. You had one asset that came on the books June 30 of 18, about $800,000. So it had very little impact in the 18 fiscal year, but it'll have much more impact 19 and going forward. So then we also have to look at, with respect to capital improvements, are you going to borrow money? Are you going to use existing cash to pay for it? And also how that affects your cash flow, because if you're going to use existing cash, then obviously it does have a significant impact on your cash. So I'll explain that as I go along. So you are responsible for a lot of things out here. You have oversight by, of course, Tennessee Department of Economic, TDEC, and then also the Water and Wastewater Financing Board. You could fall under their guidance. Now, hopefully not. If you're under Water and Wastewater Financing Board, it's because you've either had a loss, a net loss, 2 consecutive years, or you've defaulted on your debt payments, or you have a negative net position. Now, you've not done any of those. In fact, I looked at 9 previous years, and you've had a profit in all 9 of those years. Now, that profit has dwindled to the point that it was about $20,000 last year. And so it maybe was 100, then went down 10 or something like that. You can see a steady digression in the net profit to the point that it's down to about $20,000. One thing I noticed is that your revenue is pretty much stagnant. You're not realizing growth in your revenue stream at this point. And your base growth is very minimal, and so because of that, I factored in very little growth into the projected years going forward. We know, and we talked about in the previous report, that you do need to make some improvements, and your capital improvement program addresses many of those things. It's interesting that when you pump water up the side of the mountain, it's done with a pump, I believe, that was put there in 1949, and it still works every day. And it may outlast me, I don't know, but that's been a long time, been a good asset for you. So there are 2 case studies, 2 scenarios here. One, as I mentioned, when we do the historical numbers, then we project going forward. I leave everything as is. In other words, to say, what if we did nothing? We did not increase any rates. What would the picture look like going forward? So that's the first scenario that I'll talk about. I used, as I mentioned, a very minimal growth, about 0.5% a year of growth, and no appreciable decline in water usage. And this first scenario would be with no rate increases. In other words, if we just stayed where we are, what might happen going forward? I included the capital projects. There's a sheet on that we'll look at in just a moment. But as you know, oftentimes, even if revenue doesn't increase, expenses do increase, right? Even if it's just a cost of living thing. Insurance goes up, salaries, which is probably 60% or so of your expense, goes up. You purchase your water, that goes up from time to time. So invariably, we factor in 2 or 3% probably in inflationary numbers for the expense side. And with your growth being where it is, you can see that just by numbers alone, that eventually there's going to be an issue. If increases are creeping upwards, but revenues are not, and with 18 being about a $20,000 profit, I think the time is probably 19 or 20 where that's probably going to go into the negative because of the depreciation and some of the other costs that we just factor in for inflation. So we took a look at all of your expenses, salaries, benefits, other insurance, your purchased water, and here's a picture of what it looks like. Your change in net position is the way in a government you call your net income, if you will. So you can see that there's my scenario where it's just dwindled down to about 20,000, and I think next year it's probably going to go negative. You can
Brad,
see, yes.
Can I make a point here? Because
Absolutely.
Boyd and I talked about this earlier today. This looks as if things continued the way they are, that we're on this downward
Yes.
trajectory. But the way your response to that was, well, Not actually. It's if we continue the way we are but didn't make improvements. Is that an accurate way of looking at that?
But I'm not sure if that's included in this, but if this includes the capital improvements, then that, okay, then that has something to do with that very dramatic
Right.
decline. So if we kept doing what we're doing, we would still see a decline, but it wouldn't be as dramatic. The downside more than financial then would be continued diminished condition of the system.
Right, so spoiler alert, this is going to end in a water increase, which I think everybody knew was coming anyway. But I just wanted to point out that it's not that the water company's been being operated in a manner now that this is what would happen. It's doing what we know we need to going forward with, based on where our water rates are now, this is what would happen.
And as an example, I project about a $24,000 profit this year, but with the capital improvements, your depreciation goes up $100,000 a year over the next 5 years. So that alone, not that, and the inflationary increase in expenses with the minimal growth in revenues creates this, what you see right here. Okay, did I see another hand? Okay. So let's move along. And that's just another depiction of it. You can see that same thing on the line graph where your revenues, the black line, have done pretty well to this point, but that switches over to that negative that you saw on the previous slide. So really, on case one, revenues cannot keep pace with the growth in expenses, the depreciation, and we have not even factored in debt service. We were told to assume that the city would use existing cash, and your cash is pretty good, over $3 million right now, to not use an interest expense factor, but to use existing cash. So expenses are soon probably going to exceed the revenues, and the cash balance will go down as well, to the point that by the large increases as you saw here, then your cash begins to be depleted to the point in 2013, 2023, I think the cash would go negative. So I think I've built a pretty good case that something needs to be done going forward. So there's yet another look at cash. This is your cash flow. You actually had some growth in 14, 15, then it took a dip 17, 18. Now this is cash flow, not net profit, okay? It did because you spent $800,000 on some improvements. And then, but when you get aggressive with these capital improvements moving forward, and we'll see that slide in a moment, then the cash becomes negative. Couldn't figure out how to make that little square red right there. If anybody knows how, I'd like to know. Tried. Sharon and I tried and couldn't make it happen. Didn't know how. So just a review on that. Very, very small growth. In fact, we were at $1,345,000 at 15, and I'm projecting $1,004,000 this year. So 55,000 or so over about a 5-year period. Very, very minimal growth. Expenses will rise, as we've noted. So we need to do something about that. And that's scenario 2, I think, when we get into the increase. Okay, there's a look at the capital improvement plan that Mr. Veal gave us. Some automation of meters and software, and then most of that line replacement. Your city, your town has used a 50-year depreciation factor for their lines. So most of the time I see 40 on that, but you guys use 50, less on the meters. And you can see how the depreciation increases incrementally. That's the increase in depreciation, not including the 160 or 70 that you have now. So that makes a big difference going forward. Now, let's take a look at the second scenario. This does have some rate increases built into it. And the way we approached the rate increases was to not deplete the entire cash balance, but to use some of it, okay, so that when you were finished with this, you'd still maybe be around a couple $1 million in cash and still have a strong cash position, yet be able to do the capital improvements that you needed to do. So again, we used a 0.5% growth in revenue. We used the following rate increases. And when you're doing a spreadsheet, it becomes, well, how much do I need to put in to make it be positive, okay? And I've already said that we can't have a negative net income for 2 years or you'll be under the Water and Wastewater Financing Board. So the first goal is to make sure you have a net income going forward. Regardless of any other factors, you've got to have the positive net income. So to do that and factor in the capital improvement plans and the other increases in the expenses that we have, we're looking at 15, 15, 15, and we put 4 on 22 and 3. A lot of the good systems that we see, we use an annual cost of living, if you will, cost of inflation, CIP, whatever you want to call it, 3, 4% annual growth in their rates. And so we built that into the last 2 years. So 15, 15, 15, and we'll see what that does in just a moment. Cash on hand does go down, but we'll see how those numbers play out. We've also included a 4% annual increase in your purchased water. Mr. Beal felt like that was prudent to do so, and that is a big expense to you. That's one of your larger expenses is the water that you purchase each year, so it makes a pretty big difference. And then as we did in scenario 1, case 1, the annual growth in the other expenses as well. Okay. And Sharon will talk about some other strategies in just a few moments going forward. When we do this, then revenues outpace the growth in expenses, which is a good thing. And it will reverse the negative trend, and we'll see that in just a moment. So, again, this is a case 2 where we've been making a profit. It's shrunk down to a small amount, and we're about break even right here. And then with the increases that we propose, you can see how, again, the revenue is greater than the expenses, and you see some growth going forward. And the change in net position would also increase as a result of that. I already mentioned that we use some of the cash to do that, and not borrowing money, but we do encourage you. There are a lot of opportunities out there. There are grants. I see folks getting grants. There are state low-interest loan programs that are available, and there's ways other than existing cash to do some of this if you so choose. Okay. Well, here's a look at the cash flow then. The first part up to about here being the same as it was before, and then going down slightly, but not to the degree that it was. We're still, when we hit our low point right here, just a little over $2 million. And then with the rate increases, then it starts creeping back up. At first, the cash flow, which is let me go back here just a minute, right here. The cash flow, as you can see, 600, and then, what's that, about 900. Let's just say average of about 850 a year. I mean, that's cash out of pocket, so that's going to decrease your cash more than it's going to affect expense because of the fact that we're depreciating it over a long period of time. Okay, back to where I was then. Levi, about right here. Okay. I mentioned this. You need to have a positive change in net position at least every other year. Two negative years in a row puts you under their eye, if you will. And if that happens, then you'll get a nice letter from them. You'll have to go to Nashville and meet with them and show them a plan to remedy that situation. If you were to adopt these recommendations we make, I feel for sure that will not happen. Obviously, I'd come back in a year and 2 years and take another look at this, okay, and monitor it as we go. There are a lot of things we don't know. We can't say with assurance what repairs and maintenance will be in the coming year. Nobody knows that kind of thing. It's much easier to estimate salaries probably, or utilities, things of that nature, but some things we just don't know. There's no way to be accurate on those. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And with that, I'm going to hush unless you have some questions. I'll be glad to answer anything that you have. Kind of stayed away from these more complicated schedules. I've summarized it here, but before Sharon comes, do you have any questions for me?
So Sharon's going to move on into the what to do about water rates and the
Yes,
options.
yes. Mr. Lusk had a question. Yes, sir.
Do any of your assumptions include improvements in efficiency by going to automated meter reading and having new meters, or losing less water, and then the capital improvements might bring about a lower loss of water?
We discussed that, and Sharon can address it more, but I don't know how to quantify it. So no, I haven't used it. You should have a decrease in water loss, I would think, but I don't know how to put a number on it. I don't know how to say it'd be 5% or 10%, or 20 or whatever it might be. So I do think it would be a positive thing. And then by going out 3-4 years like this, and this being first up on your capital improvement plan, you could see maybe what effect the automated meters have. And it might be that maybe in that third year you don't have to do the 15 because it saves some money on water loss and all. So Sharon may can address that, but I didn't use that in my calculations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Rollins. I'm the Public Works Engineering Consultant for MTAS from our Knoxville office. And Brad and I come at these studies from two different directions. He's the finance guy, and he says how much money you need, and I do the structural part of trying to give you options of how to get there. Obviously, the easy answer is we just do X% of our current rates, and that should be the revenue we need. And that's fine for most systems if you want to approach it that way, nothing wrong with that. We have seen some comments from that wastewater finance board that Brad mentioned that they are looking more at usage rates and minimum bills and types of structures and so forth. And so we're trying to be sensitive to some of the comments we've heard from them in case you ever do come to their attention. Also, I will commend you. You have an easy structure to work with in a way because it's already a uniform structure. You have a certain rate for 0 to 4,000 gallons or 0 to 12,000, depending on when your meter is read. And then a usage rate of 578 per thousand after that. So that's what we call the uniform structure. I run into a lot of systems that have multiple tiers and steps. So we try to start working to reduce those steps when we have opportunity. But in looking at your system, it looks like you have about 3260 active taps in a given year. Some of these customers are read monthly, some are read quarterly, but overall it looks like about 3,260 customers. But you have several taps that go inactive from time to time, I understand, and are not counted in that customer count. I got that 3756 tap number from the latest audit I looked at. Most of your customers are inside, about 5% are outside. According to the contract that I saw, unless there's been a more recent version, it's costing about $138 per thousand to buy the water.
Can we hang on the last point? What accounts will we have going on after?
For the most part, those are like yard meters for irrigation systems that get turned off for periods of the year. There may be a few, during any given month that are an account that's been closed or something, but I think for the most part, that's yard meters and things like that.
Okay, as I said, you have a uniform structure, and some of your accounts are read monthly, and those are 0 to 4,000 in 2019, and then 578 thereafter. Some are read quarterly. It's, again, the same rate. It's just the minimum is 6059 instead of 2019, then the same rate. Outside rates appear to be about 125% of your inside rates. And some of your users are read every month, but the majority of your users appear to be read quarterly.
Will you define outside versus inside rates?
Outside the corporate limits. There, if you look at your, if you look at all your rate information, your rates are coded by customer group. And you have several different customer groupings. And one of those groupings is for outside users, which is a very small number. We like to look at equity when we're looking at revenue versus usage. Ideally, you should be paying, every customer should be paying exactly the same amount for every 1,000 gallons of water that they get. As I said, some rate structures don't work out that way just because there are multiple tiers. But yours is very uniform, so you have very good equity in your system in that the customer using the water is contribute the proportionate amount of revenue back to operate the system. So that works out good. And you see there on the bottom, now this is hard to read on the screen, but maybe in your handout, those are the different customer codings that are in your schedule. Now, most towns that we work with are curious about how our rates compare with neighboring places. So I put together a little chart here for you to see how your current rate stacks up with some of nearby systems around. You're not the highest one, but you're not the lowest one.
May I ask a question?
Please.
How does our base compare to other towns?
Probably a little low. I didn't specifically note that calculation, but it's probably a little low. 4,000 gallons for $20.19 is pretty low.
Okay.
So I wanted to give you a couple of options. Really, there are 3 options. I didn't state the obvious option of let's just increase our current rates 15%. We could have done that. But as I said, the State Water Finance Board is interested in us establishing if you will, a minimum charge or a no usage charge. If you think about it, there is value in just having water available, just having that tap there. Whether you use anything or not, there is a cost associated with that. The meter still has to be read, the administration still has to be done, the depreciation goes on if it's lines and meters that you're depreciating, so there is cost associated with just having water available. And that's what I'm calling a customer service charge. You could call it an availability charge, you could call it something else, but I think everybody can understand that term pretty well. So I said, and this is all based off of models that we run, so there are endless possibilities of models, but I gave you a couple that I thought would make some sense. What if we did a customer service charge of $5.94 that included no usage? And we apply it to your active meters, your 3,260 meters, just like you have now. Then we applied a $5.94 usage charge that applies to every 1,000 gallons. That would get us about $1,623,000 for the first full year of implementation. Then you would still have to do what Brad has mentioned, the 15% increase again next year in 2020, and then again in 2021. Now let me address Mr. Luck's question a little bit. What happens if your new metering scheme saves on usage, helps you find and stop leaks and so forth? This is one reason that Brad and I try to structure improvements on an annual basis. It's easier to sell 15% year after year than it is to come in and tell you folks you need a 40% rate increase. And then just leave it alone like you have for years and don't do anything with it. So that gives us some flexibility. If we miss the target, if a big user comes in and starts buying lots of water, or if you save on your water purchases because you've stopped leaks and that sort of thing, then maybe that second year could just be 10% instead of 15%. So that's one reason that we try to structure these this way.
May I ask a question to help us to digest the data just a little bit? The average, an elderly single person living alone, that person's probably not going to use 4,000 gallons. About how much would be normal?
Actually, we do a lot of rate studies, and we find that the average home uses between 4,000 and 5,000 gallons a month. But if you're talking about a single person home, that's probably going to be less than 2,500, 3,000 gallons a month.
Just want to pay attention as we look at the options to how the most vulnerable people within the community.
That's a very good concern that most towns have. How does this affect my lower use households? And I'll give you some tables so that we can dig into that a little bit more. Okay, there's another option that I'll present to you. What if you value the availability of waters for each of those meters that sometimes go unread, uncharged, and start charging every meter that you've got, all 3,700 of them, $6 a month, and then start charging $5.80 per 1,000 gallons for usage charge, then that would also bring in the amount of money that you need, $1.62 something million, and actually brings in a little bit more than option A does, according to the way our models work. So this is two options. They both start with a fixed charge for zero usage and then a charge per 1,000 gallons. The second one just includes all the meters, not just the active ones.
Say that again. The second charge includes
All 3,700 meters.
the 580. So everyone gets charged
$6 per meter.
per meter. I'm thinking about the inactive taps now.
Yeah.
So would people get charged for months that they weren't using those meters, a minimum?
Yeah.
And do they get charged now for the inactive?
No.
So that's going to, for people who are using landscaping meters, that's a big difference for them. Per month, anyway. Is that right, Boyd?
It would be a $6 difference a month.
And they're not, but they would not be charged then also the 580 on top of that. If there's no
If
water.
there's no usage, then there would be no additional fee.
Lloyd, if I might, we do have one little scenario. Those customers who turn those meters off for the winter and then turn them back on, we do assess them a service fee to turn it back on of $25. And so this might be an offset of that.
Yeah, they're required to turn those off, right, during the winter?
No, they are
I
not.
thought they were. I thought there was a thing, if you had one of those out in the front, you at least have to, you just have to cover it. Is that it?
They're responsible for protecting from the meter onto their house, no matter what.
I have to do an annual backflow test on
Right.
those things, but
Okay, so what do these charges look like for different usage rates? If you have 0 gallons usage for the month, right now, a customer would get charged $20.19. If we go to the option A, they would get charged $5.94. If we go to option B, it would be $6 per meter. Say someone, has gone to Florida for the winter and they're not using any water at all during that time, that's what their bill would look like. If they're using 4,000 gallons, then you can see the numbers across the page there. 5,000, it goes up a little bit, then on up. Not drastic changes for anybody, but enough to get you the money you need. Any questions on this one?
I wish you had the 1,000 gallon customer on there, the lower income, less usage.
Okay, well, okay.
That
we
would be
do-
$11 and something,
Right.
right?
yeah, even the 2,000 gallon customer bill will be less than it is now for a base 4,000 gallon minimum.
So that is it's actually helpful for people whose income might be tighter
Right,
and use less water.
right.
Good.
So again, and I've just put option B in this table because it's, I think the better option, but that's for you to decide. This is what bills would look like for the typical 5,000 gallon household. So that puts you on up there, but you're still not the highest one on the list.
Why B over A? Why do you recommend B over A? Since they're about the same money-wise.
Because for the equity issue that I mentioned earlier, I think there's a value of having water available at a meter, and there's a cost of serving that meter. You're paying cost for that, and you're not some months getting any revenue back from it.
Right. And as part of the study, we'd be replacing those meters also, so it helps for that too, right? Would be another way to look at it.
The automated.
Yeah, since they have to be replaced and maintained.
So that's kind of what you can expect if you go to that option. One thing that we like to look at when we do these studies is what we call a cost to provide water service number. It's simply the total expenses divided by the total gallons sold. Now, of course, you buy many more gallons than you sell because you have a significant leakage rate. But by the time you get water to that house, it's costing $5.37 per thousand. You know, these are based on last year's audits, so it could change going forward. And this is also based on the water report that we have, assuming that all that's accurate.
I don't know that it matters to us, but is that 537 per thousand, that's a working system, not a system that you need to put, if that pump went out, you know, our 50-year-old pump would,
That's all your last year's expenses.
That's-
Yeah, that's our actual cost of delivery from last year.
okay, yeah.
So you can see that definitely your usage rate, which I proposed either 594 or 580, has to be bigger than that number.
Right. But we're going to be spending significantly, and so that cost is going to go up if we look at that in the next few years.
Yes. But those costs were considered when they determined what level of revenue needs to be generated to maintain those capital project investments.
Okay.
I guess we're down to the summary. I hope we've convinced you all that you need some more revenue. And it's going to take some pretty big steps for the first 2 or 3 years. But, you know, we have some time of adjustment in case something happens that it really needs to be a 17% instead of a 15% the second or third year, or it needs to be a 10% instead of a 15%. We've got some adjustment time. We are still leaving your outside rates in the rate table I provided you all. Did you all get a little spreadsheet that had rates now and in the future? We're still leaving your outside rates at about 120% of inside rates. Do you all have questions?
Any questions you wish your council was asking Boyd?
Only those they need answers to.
I'll add, it's been a number of years since you've had a raise.
I'm sorry, would you come to the mic?
2011.
It's been a number of years since you've had a raise.
Since 2011.
2011. And since 2015, your operating expenses have gone from 1.28 million up to this year about 1.45. So almost a $200,000 increase annually in operating expense, audited numbers over that time. So about 6, 7, what did you say,
2011, so.
11, so about 7 or 8 years since your last time that you raised your rates.
I'm kind of new to all this water utility stuff, so I'm just kind of interested, like, I don't know how many thousands of gallons of water I use at my house, and I know we get a bill every 3 months.
And it's stated on that bill.
And I'm sure it is on that bill, but, so I'm thinking like, you know, if there's an increase of $6 a month, then that would be an $18 a month, quarterly increase.
And we talked about going to monthly, correct?
Yes, that would be part of the process, would be going to monthly
I think
billing.
that was my point. I think that would be helpful for people who are budgeting and, because that can make a difference for someone.
And with updated, even if not automated metering, and monthly reading, it will provide an opportunity to identify issues much quicker. We have folks that
That's
have
right.
had a leak for 2 months
And they
before
don't know
anybody
it.
knows anything about it, and that's going to help to Bill's point, that if we can do a better job of identifying those types of losses, then maybe we can minimize felt impact from what we actually end up having to do on the rate increases. But this puts us in a position to start all of that process.
That helps. And I think, I think people expect to pay more. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised, that we're saying we're going to have to increase rates.
No one will be surprised, but no one will be happy.
No.
Both of those things are true. So anything else for Brad or Sharon?
Not for me.
We have this on for further discussion later in the agenda if you wish. However, I think we do have some folks that are giving generously of their time and have significant travel ahead of them. So if there is any discussion or anything that we might need them for, if we could get into that now. If not, we can let them get on the road to the
Right, and we
house.
can always write you with questions, correct? We can write you with questions, yeah. Anything? All right, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Good presentation. Give them a second to get their stuff, and then we'll start citizens' opportunity to address council. I mentioned one of the questions I asked Boyd today, and I think it's reasonable. It's a reasonable one to come up. All the money and all the work that's happening on James, with all the beautiful new concrete that's going to be down. If we move forward, we have a lot of work that's going to have to be done on the streets. That's one of the reasons that the decision was made 2 years ago to start to do the fire hydrants, correct?
Well,
And
we,
more.
we had 3 fire flow improvement projects that were slated and we were working on. And when the James Boulevard resurfacing project started moving forward, we made the call then to replace all of the water lines in that section of James Boulevard. So they're all brand new and at least minimize the prospect of ever having to dig that nice new road up.
Yeah.
So that's all new
That's the
ductile
hope.
That's
iron
great.
pipe.
All right, citizens' opportunity to address council. State your name and where you live.
And your address.
May I approach the bench?
Certainly. Thank you, Will Doug.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you.
Yes, Dan, it's been a long time. My name is Ellis Gardner. My wife Kathy and I live in Judge Frank Wilson and Helen Wilson's house, 103 Stratford Way, just around the corner here. Just off of James. Thank you. We also live across from Chuck and Artie and Totten, 102 Stratford Way. Last Thursday, Kathy and I came home from work and found 30 hideous yellow 3-foot posts in front of our 2 yards. The town of Signal Mountain put these up without ever discussing it with us, with no warning, and even no notice. They put them up and left last Thursday. As you can see before and after pictures, the back really shows it better. I can email these to you with the smaller pictures. You have to sort of zoom in with me, my reading glasses. But you can see this, on the back of 2 big pictures, they've used an urban solution in a residential area. That picture, the urban was taken where Manufacturers Road connects with Cherokee Boulevard. We were told last Friday, my wife was told that this was a trial, that this was an alternative to the speed bumps that have been used down in Hiddenbrook successfully. All the citizens of the south half of Burnham Wood funnel through this road to get to the sidewalks on James Boulevard. There are parents with strollers, elderly walkers, bikers of all ages, and children that get off at the bus stop at the stop sign off of James to walk down this corridor to their homes. Narrowing the roads forces all the pedestrians and bike riders into the same funnel that the traffic is speeding through. Now, once again, the Director of Public Works told my wife that there was an engineering study. Their trial is the concept of narrowing the road to slow people down. I actually hold an engineer's license, professional engineer's license. And my observation has been for 10 years, the narrowing roads does not work because my leaves every fall encroach upon the road. The traffic does not slow. They go just as fast, but more in the middle of the road. I try to be conscious not to put the leaves out until I see the sign saying they're going to be picked up this week. Now, as the council members, y'all are responsible for balancing cost versus alternatives. I would think a speed bump may be more cost effective than installing a new sidewalk for the pedestrians, or even the concept of a completed street, which was part of our visioning a few years ago. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to read this into the public record. I think there might be a few other Burnhamwood citizens to come speak behind me, but I wanted to make sure that I say that if the town of Signal Mountain can do this in front of my yard, they can do it in front of yours too, without notice and without any kind of warning. I don't argue that the town of Signal Mountain has the authority to do what they want on road or right of way, but we as citizens have the authority to elect council members that preserve our residential nature of our home. Thank you.
My name is Catherine Gardner, and I'm Ellis's better half. And I also live at 103 Stratford Way, and it's just about less than half a mile that way. So actually, rather than look at the pictures, I would invite you to go over there if it's dark after the meeting, and go over there tomorrow and take a look. One of the points I want to make is that the safety of our children trumps any of our concerns. That is the most important. Rebecca's children are more important than what our house looks like. But my point that I want to make is that aesthetics and safety are not mutually exclusive. The beauty of this community is that it is a safe community. My mother-in-law never locked her doors in 50 years of living on Signal Mountain, and I have been hard-pressed to get into that habit. And it's a beautiful residential community. And I have to admit to you, my heart went down to my toes when I saw those 30 bright orange 3-foot-high poles, and I came over here to the police office, and they told me they were going to be permanent, and I thought I was going to fall out in the police station. And I think I maybe came over and did I see you? And I probably was not a very happy camper, and I apologize to you if I...
Not necessary.
I have since talked to Loretta Hopper, and bless her heart, she just maintained her cool and assured me that those poles will be there for just 2 to 3 weeks. That's what she told me. It's an experiment to see if it's going to slow people down. I have some concerns about that, and I think Ellis addressed them. Again, I'm not an engineer. I'm a lawyer. I'm trained to assess risk. I'm trained to assess liability. You have a really good lawyer over here who can do that for you. And you please go down and look at it and see, tell them what you think. I just want to come back to the idea that aesthetics and safety are not mutually exclusive. Work with us. We want to make sure that the children in the neighborhood are safe. We do not want to do anything that makes their situation less safe. But we also have, and we have a concern about the beauty of our neighborhood, the entrance into Burnhamwood, and what our house looks like. And I think if you go over there, you'll see why I just about fell out in the police station when they initially told me that it was permanent. I'm just so relieved to know that it's not. But let's work together with this. Let's figure out what we can do to address the concerns of the neighborhood children and to keep the neighborhood beautiful like the rest of Signal Mountain. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Well, my husband and I are the other half of the street where the posts have been placed.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
State your name and your address.
Artie and Todd.
And will you pull that mic down for Kathy? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start again. My name is Artie M. Totten. So yesterday we did a little experiment. You know, it's wide when you come into Stratford
so
Way from
sorry.
James
I am
Boulevard.
so
and you can
sorry.
swing in there at a pretty good speed.
Artie, and I'm sorry.
I am so sorry. I need your address for the
Oh,
record, Sharon.
102 Stratford Way.
Thank you, ma'am. I so appreciate it.
I think I've covered all the details now. Okay, so it's wide when you swing in there,
Right.
and you can speed up. And our driveway comes out just at the crest of a hill, and you really have to look to the right when you're pulling out of our driveway, because there is a very blind spot at the bottom of that hill. So consequently, you could be swinging in from James Boulevard and not at all see somebody who is biking or walking up the hill. In fact, I won't be able to do that with my dog anymore because it's just too dangerous, and with the weather conditions we've had, nobody wants to walk on the roadside if you can possibly avoid it. It's really dangerous, and I fear for the safety, as Ellis and Kathy said, of bicyclers, children coming home from school, elderly people like me walking their little dogs, and anybody else who might get caught in the blind spot when somebody's coming through that area. I've also observed that people don't seem to be slowing down that much if they don't see anyone else coming. But I haven't made an engineering study or anything. That's just what I've noticed. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for the service, your service to the community. I haven't been to one of these meetings in a long time, and therefore I had sort of forgotten what a responsibility it is and how much time and energy it takes up. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Artie.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Woods, and I live at 107 Stratford Way. And Thursday afternoon, when I went to pick up my kids from school, my heart fell to the floor that I was going to have to explain to Kathy Gardner why it was probably my fault that these hideous yellow things were in my house. Approximately 2.5 years ago, our next door neighbors, the Laramores, who are at 109 Stratford Way, or 111, I apologize, started voicing our concerns to the police and to the Public Works Department that we had, and once we took over the neighborhood, we brought a lot of children with us. And right now, from age 1 to age 13, there's about 12 children, elementary school children, in a 250-yard, part of Stratford Way. We have we have two hills, blind curves, and then a big old dip right in front of our house. I work from home every day. My window, my computer looks right outside. If I'm home, I can see how much traffic's out there. I've done everything from yelling at teenage children to very sweet little old ladies in their Mercedes. I've done it all, but please slow down. We have gone through the gamut. I think my first voicemail message with Loretta Hopper was October 10th, 2016. I know because I've kept them all. I have emails through the years. It took us a long time to get a traffic study to get anybody's attention. Then we had to decide what kind of traffic study. We had a little spy box outside of our house for about somewhere between 3 and 5 months, I'm not sure. And then it took months and months for us to get the results, which technically we haven't received a full report on. All we requested, and I know all is a special word, but what we requested were speed bumps. They seemed the cheapest, least intrusive, most aesthetic solution to the situation. We tried to do it quietly, respectfully. We were told that there was no protocol. I respect, my last email says, the protocol seems to be that no protocol is working because most people just go away. Neighbors on down the street said that they inquired several years ago about putting in speed bumps, and after about 1.5 years, he gave up. I think we're a little bit more stubborn than that. But while there are certainly several opportunities and options for what to do to slow down traffic, what they did here was shocking. I mean, the aesthetics, the property value, complete lack of enjoyment, quiet enjoyment of one's home. These were just completely unnecessary, even as a trial. There was not even a note on their doors. There was nothing to let them know, why are these things here? I just think it was handled very badly. And we still really don't have a resolution or any map of how we're going to get a resolution. I too, I'm not an engineer, I'm also, an attorney, but I've also had a 3-year internship with a traffic engineer in a major city in Tennessee for 3 years. I do know what it's like to come to these meetings weekly. I do know what it's like to write ordinances and what the things that are to be considered, and 2.5 years is a really long time to jump through the hoops that we have, and then for the disruption of our neighborhood has just been a little bit too much for us to handle. And we just would like a common sense resolution to the problem without creating a complete uproar.
All right, thank you. And I know there's at least another person who wants to speak on this. I think part of your coming tonight is part of the resolution. It's all part of the system. So thanks for standing up. It makes you feel nervous to stand and speak sometimes, but we're all friends, and I wouldn't want something ugly in front of my house, and nor would anyone else here. We all, but we also want people to slow down. If we could just get people to slow down, none of this would be necessary, but it's not easy. So, yes, state your name and your address.
My name is Charlie Gardner. I'm 127 Gulf Drive, and that was happening to be my little brother, if you can believe that. But I grew up here on the mountain, and I'm going to talk completely different from what I plan to talk about, because I want to offer you some of my perspective. Because the last 30 years I've been living on the coast of California, and I decided to retire and move back to the mountain I grew up on and I love. And hopefully I can share a little perspective. I was going to talk about the traffic and ditto what everybody was saying about the Stratford Way. In California, we would deal with that. Technically, the road I lived on was widened, paved, people were going faster. Ran over a cat that we had. And I was the president of the school board at the time. I thought I'd throw my political weight around, and they told me I'd have to go canvass the neighborhood and get at least 8 signatures to get, not what they call speed bumps, but traffic calming devices. Yes. But we did, and it worked. And, there's a process for everything. But I want to share, when I was making the decision to move back home, I talked to some of my friends, and they go, Charlie, you don't want to move back here. There's so many people that, it's a lot more than when you grew up. When, I grew up here, we walked to Signal Mountain Elementary, and, there's like 3,000 people on the mountain, and now there's like 12 or 15,000. And I said, so I've been living in the Bay Area, and what's the, rush hour traffic like? 15, 20 cars, one-way traffic every now and then. I welcome that. I came back, I moved into Gulf Drive, so I get to go out on Timberlinks, and there's that much talked about in social media, that 5-stop way, James, and Timberlinks and all of that stuff, and people rolling through it, and oh my gosh, it's just, Armageddon. And, from my perspective, is I've got the snapshot of 30 years ago and now. And the difference is really not that much. If we think about it, how many fatalities have we had in that 5-way intersection that we're thinking about a peanut and, doing something about? I know you guys have got, probably not many.
I don't think there have been any.
If any.
0.
And I think you hit it right on the nose, is that when I got back here, it was like, okay, there's a few more people, but take your time, take a breath, slow down, stop in the stop signs. That's what they're there for. So my perspective is, it's not the doom and gloom. It's still the place that I wanted to move back to. And there's still a lot of good about the place to come back to. So what I wasn't prepared to talk about, but I wanted to mention, is the water side of it. I'm a civil engineer. I'm a water guy. I've built water, wastewater treatment plants for the last 40 years. I've been involved with CIPs and traffic and a lot of that from an engineering standpoint. So I watched the presentation tonight, and I can offer you, because you're asking about the single retired guy that gets hit. I went through my bill today, as a matter of fact, and called my brother Ellis, because my bill here was a 3-month deal. It's about $75 for the water, $115 for the sewer. The water is comparable to what I was paying in California. I'm using about the 12,000 gallons or 4,000 gallons a month, so I think I must be taking pretty long showers or something, because I use a little bit more than just the normal average single person. But the rates, can be a little misleading because if we have 15% a year for the next 3 years, my water bill is going to be about $115 instead of $75. The cost per, I ran some numbers while they were making the presentation here, and the $27 they were paying will be about 41 after 3 years. So we'll be up at the higher tier Montagues, the Waltons, those things you saw. Personally, my opinion would be there's probably some happy medium in there because it looks like you're preserving your cash level or not dipping into it too deeply. But there might be some relatively good option here because from what I've heard and seen, because I was one that went off the meter for a while because I bought my house a little over a year ago, all those sort of things. But I think we've got a decent infrastructure. I think you've got a decent CIP plan.
So we're going to discuss this a bit more
Yeah.
this evening, and I hope you'll stick around for that. And we may find that we need to discuss this more. I wish it's a little more complicated than just, it looks okay now, because there are some things that need to be done. And
Yeah, I'm sure there's.
yeah, and I'm gonna cut you off because we're trying to keep folks at 3 minutes, and everybody's done a good job, just so that as many people can speak. Yeah,
The 5 stop waiting around James and Timberlake's,
yeah,
take your time to do it right. I mean, it's more, maybe park a cop out there every now and then, because in the rush hour, people do tend to roll through.
sure.
And a few tickets will.
What we find out is when police officers are at places, it gets better, but thank you very much. Anyone else?
Ann Haygood, 506 James Boulevard. I just wanted to thank you for having ordered the MTAS viability study and the MTAS rate study. I think they're very helpful.
Thanks, Ann. Anyone else? If not, we'll close it out. Anybody else want to speak? All right, so thank you, and really do appreciate it. And if I'd known we were done, I wouldn't have stopped you. But that's it. So could I. All right, we're going to move on to resolutions now. Starting with board reappointments. What do we have tonight, Boyd? Wait, before we leave that, since we aren't going to talk about the Stratford Way situation formally tonight, is there anything you want to say about what our thoughts are and where we are on that? I mean, based on what you've heard tonight and based on what you've heard for the last few weeks.
Right. I mean, when you talk about safety, that really is part of why those very unattractive things are there, because they do get your attention. This is one of the recommendations that came from an MTAS traffic engineer. These are something you should try. If you do it permanently, it's generally done with curbing and things like that, which aren't very obvious on the front end. So if you're just going to try it, you want to make sure people see it and are aware of it. And that's why these are used on a temporary basis, because it's safer and people aren't surprised by something more solid and harder to see. I will not dispute that we could have done a better job of communicating with folks. Some of the folks that have brought the speeding issue to our attention over the years, several months ago, Loretta let them know that this was something we were looking at and we might do on a temporary basis. Other people in the area, we didn't communicate that to, and that, again, I don't argue that point. But it is just a temporary measure to see if that narrowing of the roadway has an impact or not. And if we were going to do it, we wanted to do it safely. And that's what we were trying to accomplish.
Do we know when they're coming down?
In 2 to 3 weeks.
Would you mind coming to the
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
So, Amanda, I want to make sure I understand this quickly. I thought, what was your name again?
Rebecca
Rebecca. So I thought I heard Rebecca say that she had requested speed bumps, and I know in the past, years ago, there was the big controversy over speed bumps. Why did we choose to narrow the road versus speed humps, bumps, whatever's in Hidden Brook already?
I someone up there maybe on my email string, and I came tonight very late last minute, sorry, wasn't working.
Could you please go back to the?
Yeah, I was asking Boyd.
I didn't come prepared. I'm happy to talk about it informally. I mean, we've had a very cordial relationship, although stilted. And Mr. Bill may be on the email string. I'm not sure if that's you or somebody else with the same last name. But we have gone through several different discussions about what's optimal. Some people hate speed bumps. I understand that. That particular stretch of land, of street, just from my past experience, from the knowledge that I have, I mean, it just seems to be that may be our only resolution without narrowing the street, without some of the other solutions that were provided. I didn't get a full copy of the traffic study for the other suggestions. I just happen to be somewhat familiar with them. We've not been told no. We've been trying to go through every channel to do what we could from our perspective because of the very specific nature of that stretch of the street.
Okay. And that,
Thanks,
thank
Rebecca.
you for clarifying. Was that an option, Loretta or
It
Speed bumps?
is an option.
It is an option, so
So-
we're looking at these, what are they called?
They're,
The-
Well, those are delineators.
Okay, we're looking at delineators, and then we're gonna look at what it would be to do speed
the
bumps?
delineators themselves are just a temporary measure to accomplish the narrowing effect. So if it's determined that that's the best way to do it, there'll be another means of doing it, not with those big sticks. So it'll be curbing or something like that that will be far more attractive. But as I understand it, we did do the speed study through there. That information was conveyed to the MTAS consultant and the road characteristics, and they made some suggestions on some things we should try or that
Before
might
going
be.
to speed bumps.
So, yeah, that's
So just to clarify
That's
also,
where we are.
they didn't do a traffic report.
right.
We discussed everything and we sent him all the information that we had and he came up with some options.
Okay.
So there's not a real traffic study.
You're right,
Around Harper's 207 Forest Trail. So he didn't come up with a traffic study. So he came up with these options. So he talked about the speed humps and traffic circles and they call that choking, narrowing of the lane, maybe a raised median, these other things. So we looked at the traffic circle. There's not enough room to put traffic circles in the intersections of like Malcolm and, yeah, but the other one. Primrose. And then we thought, well, narrowing down the lanes, and from all of the nationwide information that the engineer sent me states that narrowing lanes of traffic does slow cars down. If you've got a big, open, wide lane, you're probably going to go, as fast as you can. But all the traffic studies we've looked at show that narrowing lanes does help slow the cars down. So we looked at that. His opinion on the speed humps was that due to the horizontal and vertical curvature of the road, when we placed the speed humps, they would probably have to be pushed farther back than where the area of concern was. So he wasn't sure if by the time we pushed them far enough back, they may not be as effective as we hope. So we had several options that he proposed, and he did say using temporary delineators to do that, to do any of these, is a good solution, and to be sure to use the bright yellow
The ugliest ones
delineators,
possible.
and to have them in enough coverage so they're not just spotted out where you can't really tell, what that is for. So that is the advice we followed. I apologize for not notifying people, but we had 2 days of good weather
with no rain where we were able to install them. And so we marked them and they went out, installed them.
We've been in the same place for 9 years.
Well, and sometimes it has to get a little warm so that we all go, okay, we're uncomfortable with this. And thank you to everyone for being reasonable. And this, I mean, this is how public service works. These are people trying to solve a problem. Sure, just, yeah.
And if you would give your name and address again for the record.
Catherine Gardner,
Thank you.
103 Stratford Way. Again, I'm not an engineer. These are just some thoughts that, off the top of my head. And if narrowing of the road is what the children need, I'm going to be okay with that as long as it's aesthetically in keeping with the neighborhood. These are just some thoughts I had. What empirical information do we have now, and what empirical information will we have to show that narrowing the road for just a 20-foot area is actually going to work? Have we done anything to see how many cars come through there at any particular time and how many are going too fast? And therefore, will we be able to, what kind of monitoring are we doing now that these delineators are in place, to know that they're actually having an effect on the traffic currently? Sure, go ahead.
I think that's I love empirical information. It's not empirical if people just shout it out. I mean, it's empirical if it's done as a study, and we know. And the first step in that is finding out what questions need to be asked. And so I don't think we should do that now, but I think we should do this again, specifically about this, so that we all sit down and find out what Loretta has already learned. And does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I just have one more comment.
Sure.
I have been standing out in my yard and watching people go through this bottleneck. And what they're doing is, some of them are slowing down, some of them are not, but they're all going outside of their lane into the other lane, at least partially. Some of them are absolutely straddling the center line, and some of them are just riding their wheels on the center line. But nearly everybody is going way over, outside their lane, so.
What, okay. If there was another car company coming, they would be responding differently to that.
They
And so
might
all
be.
of those things happen to be, depending on the accident situation.
They
Right.
might be. My concern would be you've got to go over there and check it out for yourself, but
Right.
there's a dip there. And if you've got a shorter person or a smaller kid on a bike, they might not see them right away. They might not see them until they come right up on them. I'm not so concerned about two cars passing each other. I'm more concerned about people that trying to get through there and then being pushed closer to the cars. And all it will take is one accident there, and the
Sure.
city will be held liable for creating a hazard. That's how a lawyer looks at it. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to
Loretta?
our attention.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we consider with speed tables like we installed in Hiddenbrook?
Basically, that's what we're talking about with the speed humps,
Okay.
speed tables.
Now, folks in that neighborhood seem to think they're very effective.
They are.
I haven't had any
We need more,
pushback or
we need
comments
two on
since.
Hiddenbrook Lane, I can tell you that.
Do we get, one of the main
I
problems
speed
with
down
speed bumps is the noise. With the speed tables, are there generally complaints about noise?
We haven't gotten any that I'm aware of.
All right.
Just at the time we did the
Yeah,
speed hump.
we need to
We gotta move
finish
on.
this and move on. But this has been really useful, so again, thanks to everybody for speaking up. Now we're moving to resolutions. And we'll do board reappointments, and so Boyd, you probably already queued that up. What do we have?
Yes, we had, during the general reappointment process, we have a couple folks from the Personnel Committee that did not see or get their letters or anything. We circled back with them and were able to contact them, and they do wish to continue on that committee, and we are getting ready to need to meet with them a good bit coming up in the budget. So being that they are both reappointments, I went ahead and did the resolution for your consideration.
Can we talk just a bit about what the Personnel Committee does?
Sure.
So what does the Personnel Committee do?
Well, they look at issues with personnel policy, anything that we take to them, and that's one of the things that we've been kind of keeping a list of things that we need to revisit or clarify on that. Generally, during the budgeting process, they look at wage increases and things like that. One of the main things that they've done over the years is help us look at our insurance coverages and different options. When we were basically in private sector insurance, we would, our broker would shop that and we'd come back with, okay, here are the different plans from be it Cigna or Blue Cross or whoever, and they would help wade through all that and make a recommendation on which of those they thought was the best. A few years ago, we went to the state employee coverage insurance, so there hasn't been that need. So this year, moving into looking at rate structure and things like that, and again, having several things to look at on the personnel policy, then we'll be calling them and getting them back in the swing of things.
With those kinds of personnel policy matters, are those things that this council becomes aware of at any time? And how does that happen?
We'll bring it to you with resolution for adoption, any changes.
I'm also the liaison.
Okay, but have you guys met? Right, so I mean, so you wouldn't know what those were either, I guess, because it hasn't met for a while.
Right.
Right. Is there a plan to change that?
Yes, like I said, we're moving into the budget process now, and we have the other things that we've identified that we need to address. And I assume we'll have several meetings in the coming months.
I don't know the people, and we don't have resumes or anything. So if anyone else wants to speak to the people who are reapplying.
Robbie Henderson is an HR professional.
I know.
She chaired that committee before. Just a strong HR background.
Absolutely.
And I think could give us, some insight into what the rest of the world outside of local government is doing on HR policy.
That's the only one for.
Yes.
Just for this.
And again, generally on these with reappointments, there's not an application or updated information or anything. So if there's a need.
It's a reappointment, let's reappoint them.
Right, but
They've been
this is.
serving, we've not had any
Sure.
problems.
But we don't know that unless we ask the question, which is what I was doing.
I move to approve.
We have to get up.
Gotta read that, gotta read
I
the
mean,
caption.
the resolution is a resolution reappointing Robbie Henderson and Callan Pearson to the Town of Signal Mountains Personnel Committee.
Okay, and we have a first.
Motion to approve.
We have a first. You'll be a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other or the parties here, anybody? Nope. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Carries 4-0. We have, the next resolution is a resolution appointing Margaret Maggie Green to the Town of Signal Mountains Library Board. And this is what we voted on at the last meeting, to send it here.
Motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Anybody have any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 4-0. We had a couple of openings on the DRC. Did we get those applications in?
I think we got one in today, but I don't know about any others.
To move that to next time?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have those
So we
for
still have,
discussion.
do we have 2 applications in or 1?
I think we got one in today. I don't know if we got
There's
any
2
others.
openings.
There's 2 openings. I know of one application that came in today, but they don't come directly to me,
Okay.
so I can't.
So anybody interested, spread the word. We have another opening on the DRC as well.
Which is the Design Review Committee.
Design Review Committee, very good. Play acronym bingo. What's that? I don't think they do. All right. Next, we have a resolution authorizing the town manager to purchase one mini excavator from Mid-South Equipment Company, Chattanooga, Tennessee, for a total amount not to exceed $45,900 to be used by the Water Department for the town of Signal Mountain, Tennessee. Want to tell us about this?
This is a budgeted item. You will note in the memo, we only got 2 bids on it. This is actually the higher, but it is the one that meets all of the specifications. This is slightly over what we have budgeted. However, the vehicle that we purchased last meeting came in under budget. So overall, we're good with this amount.
Came out even then, so we're not really over budgeted?
No.
What generally do we use a mini excavator for?
Trenching, digging up, when there's water leaks and things like that. A lot of times it's difficult to get a full-size backhoe or excavator into an area, and this is better suited for the types of digging we need to do on repair work.
What kind of excavator is it?
It is the JCB. Is that right, William? Yeah. Yep.
ACB 45-2. We have a motion?
Motion to approve.
And Bill seconded.
On a roll, Bill.
Any other discussion?
Is this replacement equipment?
No, it's not.
Mini
Yes.
excavator was in, okay.
Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries 4-0. We have no ordinances, so we have a discussion now about revisions to design criteria. And probably the best thing to do is just read through some of this pretty quickly. You think? Do you have a summary you want to offer?
No, we do have Karen
Karen's
Rennick
here,
and Ed Garvey from DRC
That's a
that
good idea.
might be able to give a good overview.
We have past and current chair people, so come on up, Karen. Say your name and your address, please.
Karen Rennick, RENNICH, 715 Texas Avenue. And I am the past chair of the DRC. Ed Garvey's the current chair, but this was a action from 2018 prior to the election. So Ed queued me up to do this portion. Just to mention that the DRC is a volunteer board appointed by the town council. We are excited to hear that additional members are coming on board. That helps us with our quorum. The DRC does help implement the town's design standards by hearing cases and also occasionally recommending changes to those design standards. While I was just looking at some of the town's council's code information prior to the meeting, it does state regarding the DRC that, and this is in town's code section for the DRC, in order to stay current, at the request of the town council, the DRC shall also review and revise its principles, standards, and regulations from time to time. And that's what this is. Last year, Dick G asked that the DRC provide greater clarity and a little more structure to some of the sections of the design standards, and really felt that the kind of the exterior materials would give the greatest bang for the buck, because that is something we do address landscaping and signage, but for just a remodeling, revision, new construction, it was determined that the exterior materials, looking at that most specifically, would probably be the biggest help. So section 14407 of the town code addresses exterior materials and forms, and the DRC chunked that one section and really essentially rewrote it. So we had two different actions from two different meetings, but took 14407, There's 7 current sections in it regarding building materials, windows, doors, the type of, talks about roofing, and redid that section. So some of the existing language was carried over, and I can just hit on them briefly if you would like. The first one, currently it says, the existing language says, the commission requires building materials that are lasting in quality, residential in scale, have good architectural character and appearance. The revised language is the commission requires building materials that are lasting in quality, have good architectural character and experience, leaving out the residential and scale with the intention that that be provide a little more clarity elsewhere, that was not something the DRC could speak to as easily, and would rather wrap that into some other language. The second section was really what the town council had asked more specifically and I'm assuming that was based on feedback to them about building materials. I'll just read some of the language from the existing code that was intended to clear up. It talks about durable grades of materials being preferred. There's materials generally considered inappropriate. Some are acceptable. Some should be used with great care and is normally only acceptable for certain things. Some are generally considered unacceptable. Some shall be avoided unless the scale is reduced. So it was not very clear if something is allowed, if it's acceptable, not acceptable, prohibited. And it was determined, the DRC in talking felt that it does provide more clarity for an applicant understanding what is really the town's vision. The town's vision is small town, kind of the small town character, for someone coming in interested in doing a project, the town really being able to look at and understand clearly how that is implemented in the design standards. So right now there is a recommending a table, acceptable, prohibited, and then trim and accents. So acceptable, some of these are just moved over. Stone, brick, and stucco are already in the town's regulations as preferred. Those moved into acceptable category. Wood siding was also, I think wood was also in there. It was clarified, currently it says wood. The DRC made the distinction between wood siding, which is acceptable, and plywood, which is prohibited, which we have seen in exterior construction in the city of Chattanooga.
So like board and batten, which is a kind of plywood?
Do you know?
I think the intent was.
And your name and address.
Ed Garvey, 502 Signal Mountain Boulevard. I think the intent was plywood as a finished product. When you see board and batten, it's typically painted or finished in a way that you would not know the material. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, for instance, with hardy boards, you get board and batten, and it's a cementitious panel.
And it's not wood.
You really see that texture underneath the paint.
Right. Cementitious is an awesome word, by the way.
One of the things, I will direct your attention to the proposed number 4. Any building material that's not identified or classified above may be presented to the DRC for consideration. This was understanding that new materials may come around, or there might be more specifics or something new to the town. So that would be, if it's not specifically on there and there's a question, and Chuck Martin perhaps cannot speak to that, that would be something that could be presented to the DRC. There's one of the other, thinking about, because previously it said plywood should be avoided. It was determined that plywood's not an appropriate exterior material. Large expanses of concrete shall be avoided. This was previous. It's determined by the DRC that exposed concrete block is not an acceptable building material. That split face or fluted concrete block could be. And again, and just generally metals, high quality architectural metals, and then painted or factory finished metal. So these are, but not aluminum siding. That has gone into the prohibited categories. And then there's a list of trimmer accents that could be acceptable. So some of these, we went through the list of the current exterior list of materials, whether they be preferred or whether they shall be required, kind of the shall, should, preferred list, and just to make sure that they were either addressed one way or the other for the most part. So that's really just to clarify the materials a little bit better and not leaving as much wide open discretion on that. Just moving on, trim and accent materials are clearly subordinate. And the intention is to not have fiberglass or metal or vinyl trim as a primary building material. Again, saying that building materials that are not identified or classified can be presented to the DRC. And on the existing 14407, number 7, says the use of standard 3-tab shingles are normally not acceptable, but will be considered on a case-by-case basis. The new recommended requirement is that this use of standard 3-tab shingles is prohibited. It was felt that that was not maintaining the quality for the town, but that dimensional asphalt fiberglass shingles are an appropriate building form, as our cedar shake, slate, metal shingle, or seam roofs are acceptable. So that was a recommendation by the DRC to no longer consider standard 3-tab shingles as a roofing material. So the DRC requirements do apply to commercial construction. Churches are one that the DRC sees more often than not, but not single-family residential homes, of course.
Can I ask a question? It says seam roofs. Is there an architectural distinction between a standing seam roof and a seam roof? Should it say standing seam? Because that's the better.
Metal shingle or seam roofs?
Standing seam is the,
I can't answer that. I don't know what the intent of seam roof was. If it's
all metal roofs have a seam of some kind, but standing seam has that.
as regular pattern.
Yeah.
And if that needs clarity.
It might need some
provide
clarity,
some clarity. But that was just one also that, because right now, the existing regulation says dimensional asphalt, fiberglass shingle, cedar shake, slate, or metal shingle or seam roofs are acceptable. That is a holdover from the current regulations. So then, moving on to the, so that left after the first big revision the next month, addressing windows and doors, which are also part of that section. The language currently says, the use of windows and doors similar in appearance to those used in residential structures is encouraged. Large expanses of glass are discouraged unless it is broken up into smaller components by the use of window mullions. And if you were at a recent DRC meeting, we had lots to discuss about window mullions. The new proposed language, and this is a little bit more specific and is more reflective of some of the changes the DRC members have seen in regulations addressed in other communities' regulations. The proposal is to the use of windows and doors similar in appearance and scale to those used in residential structures is encouraged. Large expanses of glass are discouraged unless it's broken up into smaller components. That's giving a little bit more.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, on that one. And I know this is draft, but is this okay? Feedback now on this? Is this the time?
Yes, this is the DRC's recommendation to the town council.
So
Yeah,
we
you
could.
can do, yes, I think.
I mean, we
whatever
could
you
send
want
it
with
back
We were asked to
also.
provide some recommended language, and then so I guess whatever feedback you have, or if there's something specifically related to this.
Yeah, well, since you're here, and we have an architect also, it also helps. Is there any kind of language that says, smaller is nebulous. Smaller can mean somebody can go, well, I've cut it in half. That's smaller than a 10 by 10 sheet of glass. Is there any sort of architectural idea for dividing up spaces? For instance, if you have 8 by 8, does 4 look better than, cutting it in half? Is there?
There wasn't anything creativity, but we want to allow, so we want to allow them some sort of freedom to come up with, you know, some decorative.
If this building was being built again, would this wall be adequate? Would that represent that?
That's always a good question. Well, architecturally speaking, a curtain wall is typically a multi-story. This being, I would call this storefront. And so yes, I guess there is some question in there is we say large expanses of glass are discouraged. Well, we don't really say how large. It's sort of left up to, I guess, the designer of the project to break that up.
Right.
And it can be, you know, some sort of it has to do with the massing of the building and how the scale of it feels. And so we sort of leave some of that creativity to the design. I know I'm not really answering.
No, I mean, it's why this is also difficult, because it's hard to write something when we haven't exactly said. It's like we've talked about earlier, to just say, we want it to look kind of woodsy. Doesn't really give a designer a whole lot to go on.
It's so subjective too, I mean.
Yeah.
I think that, I know when, in some years past, when the election came to us with their new building, you know, we had a lot of feedback and told them we thought they should do this or that on it. And I think that in this case, this could be something that would come to DRC. We might, I could see us saying, hey, maybe you need to break that glass front up a little bit. It's too much glass without being divided.
So that's interesting. This serves almost like the land use plan does a bit. Though I guess there's some, I mean, you can have prohibited things in this. And we have prohibited things in our land use plan too. So I guess it's like that.
I think there's no way you write guidelines and regulations that address every scenario, and that's why the DRC is here, is to try to apply the spirit of those regulations and look at each project and keep some continuity while understanding that each one is a little different.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to handicap the design process either. I think we should give some creativity with the design.
Sure.
I will mention that is something that we've talked about. When I first started the DRC, I didn't hear as much discussion about, well, we want to see good design, and sometimes writing the regulation could inhibit that some. So in this discussion, that was one of the, we did talk about can you have a full glass wall and look, it'd be like an AT&T store, is that acceptable in the town? So we kind of talked through all of that, and I do agree, what is discouraged unless it's broken up. I mean, that's kind of that would be on a case-by-case basis. That's hard, that's not quantified clearly. But the DRC, the way it is composed right now is, you know, it kind of a balancing guidance and standards with creativity and wanting someone to come and bring a really great building, but sometimes that's within kind of these parameters and not these parameters.
Right.
But that's just the way that the approach has been right now, but that's not always been the approach.
Sure.
And I'm still learning again, so ask a lot of questions. With the design review committee, is it a requirement that somebody who is buying a commercial business or remodeling a commercial business, they have to go before the design review committee and show their design?
It's based on how much they're doing, right?
That's correct. There's language in there that says if you're doing a certain amount of work on the building, it would come before the DRC. Some things do not trigger a review by the DRC. So there are going to be some small remodels that don't require anything. Recently, the DRC's reviewed the SunTrust Bank, it's reviewed the Hilltop store is currently, gas station is currently under review, and
we reviewed
yeah, so
we reviewed the changes to
Yeah.
and yeah,
And
Okay.
Bob Franklin's changes
Yes.
coming up for
Yes, that was the
Memorial.
one that took me a second to remember, so.
Well, I
there
think
are
these are
some
great
options.
because I think this does have to be kind of a guiding template to, and I was talking about this at the Planning Commission the other night. I mean, I believe that our town needs to be more thoughtful in the way that how are we going to grow and what's it going to look like? And how are we going to create a better town vibe, is the word I keep using. And I think that these kinds of buttoned-up type regulations or recommendations are really important to sort of guide us in the right way. So you don't want to hamstring people that are designers, but you also want to have a really clear roadmap and how they're supposed to, implement that. So I don't know if we need more or if we need less.
Can I ask a related but unrelated question? It's a good time because you bring up what triggers someone having to come to the DRC. And if it's a remodel, it's a certain percentage or there's certain changes. And this is a question that just came up, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but it would serve to illustrate what kind of things you do have to bring. And the question I got was the ambulance station that's directly behind you. When they built that, they put wood siding on it to match our buildings. But they're having the same issue with wood siding that we have between decay and woodpeckers and everything else. They're like, this is not the best scenario. So their question is, can we pull all of this off? It's a cinder block building, and can we stucco it and paint it back the same color? So they will be changing the material, but they'll be changing it to a material that's listed as acceptable and not significantly change. Every time you paint a building back, it's going to be a little different color, but they plan to go back with pretty much the same color using acceptable material, but it is going to be a change.
I have the existing ordinance in front of me, and 14402, project subject to review. Number 2A1 says, if this is, I think, addressing that, if the area of exterior building repair or replacement exceeds 25% of the total surface area of the building, then the project is subject to the commission's review based on compliance with these principles and standards. So, of course, we would leave it up to Chuck Martin to determine, but I read that to say if you're replacing 25% more of your exterior siding, then it's subject to review. And it is an accepted, but that doesn't mean that exempts it from DRC review. So several years ago, the town council made the change that some signs didn't need review if they met certain criteria. So those the DRC doesn't review. If you meet the size, the materials, then you don't go before the DRC. But in this case, you could meet that acceptable material, but you would still have DRC review. So
Thank you very much.
I would understand that to meet.
This was a handy time to get that answer, so I appreciate it.
Can I ask another question too? Because we have two people that are open positions on the design review committee. So, and if somebody wants to apply for that, do they need to just like design and have good taste, or are there requirements in terms of what they do for a living, or what their training is, or their
There are
background?
some recommendations on.
Yeah, I don't have the code in front of me, but there are
I think it's
positions.
7 seats and 4 need to be some sort of occupation or training. Land use planner, architect, builder, realtor, business owner, I think are.
We had a landscape architect
Landscape
once.
architect.
Currently, there's 2 architects,
Electrician.
a builder, a lawyer, and Aaron's.
So the ideal candidates then to fill those positions would be
Well, it sounds like
What?
these other two could just be people who have an opinion.
who just like,
Yes, I think, so my understanding, as long as you had your, kind of the 4 places occupied by someone in those professions or with that training, that the other people don't have to be.
Okay.
And then as, the composition changes, I guess, of course, but.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any more questions?
Can I touch briefly
you
on
bet.
the last two changes?
Oh,
I'm
sure.
sorry, just because we do think they're important. Under windows and doors, this is new to us. And this is, mentioning that we do want creative design and for someone to present the design they think is appropriate for them. But we did want to talk about the amount of openings, really windows and doors that need to be on your building. That's when you're walking down the street and you're walking by a building and you can look in and you can see activity and you can, that's what makes that exciting to see that. So we did want to stress, because that is something the town is kind of that small town feel. We did want to stress that you must have a minimum percentage of windows and doors. We don't want to just see a flat facade and one door. We want to be able to look in and we want to see light and people. So that is a new requirement. If you face a street, you should have 40% should be windows and doors at a minimum. And then also we wanted, when you do put in your windows and doors, we wanted to be transparent enough that we can look through. Otherwise, it functions really as just a blank wall.
What about businesses that get afternoon sun?
So I think you can have it dark on the outside, but they can see out clearly from the inside. Is that what you're asking? Perhaps you could rephrase your question.
Every business is on that side
Yes.
of the plaza has to have something, or their customers cook.
Yes, so we said glass is considered to be transparent was a transparency higher than 70%, an external reflectant of less than 11%. And this was doing some research and looking at what other communities did, and I think that provides some, yes, reflective quality, so you can still see in, but it's not just clear glass. So I don't think we have a sample of that, but we did look at some other places and got some recommendations on that. So that's what we came up with that, yes, they need to have some sort of, and that's up to them on some of that.
So I'll ask,
But also be able to look in.
if this was a commercial business, would we be able to have those shades?
You can have the shades, but the glass itself would need to meet the requirements. So yes, someone could conceivably meet this with their doors and windows and then pull down the shades. We don't regulate anything inside the building. There is some language in the sign ordinance about that, but once it's inside the building, the DRC no longer regulates that. So yes, that is a possibility that they could do something else.
I mean, it defeats the purpose of,
Well, the hope is that and this is, you can tell I'm getting on my sandbox a little bit here. You know, we're building communities for 50, 100 years. These buildings hopefully are contributing to that. And we, that tenant might want to close those, blinds, but hopefully that next tenant doesn't. And we kind of keep that. We know that contributes to good design and good cities and towns. And we're trying to implement the town's vision of that, small town feel, and that's something we felt did contribute to that, particularly as the town becomes more walking and biking friendly and people are out more. We're hoping that helps with that.
Thank you.
That was great.
all right.
So we are happy to take any feedback that might come, so just let us know, but it does sound like we do need to confirm the seam roof.
And with both of you here, we want the DRC to meet with the Planning Commission, for us all to meet together. It's,
Near term or from now on?
no, no, just soon, so that we can all sit down and talk.
It might be a work session that we just
Yes,
set up on that.
yeah. I think Cheryl might have, she's probably written you, Karen, about that maybe.
I've not seen that.
Okay.
So, but if she did, I'll forward it.
Yeah. If not, she'll probably send it out. It's come up a couple of times that it seems like it would be a good idea for us, for multiple reasons, to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And water rate study. I asked many of my questions as it went along. You surely have some questions.
What are I guess the only question I can think of right now is what are the steps for determining which scenario we want to walk through? And,
So we can talk about
these are preliminary results, right? Or
Right.
or is this it?
Well, yeah, this is their
This is their,
recommendation.
okay,
And their recommendation is that we use option B.
yes.
Right. And should we choose to use option B, we would need to have all of this in place as we do our budget, or at least by the time we go into the next fiscal year, because they're counting on the rate increase based on option B for the next budget.
Starting July 1st.
Yeah, starting July 1st. So if that's what we are potentially going to do, we need to work backwards from that and see what steps need to take place here. So that's where we are.
I think we need to move forward.
With?
Option B as soon as possible.
Okay.
We clearly have a lot of projects on that long-range plan, and without the additional revenue, then we're not going to be able to do them. I'm convinced that new meters are much more accurate than old meters. Typically, old meters under-record water usage, and new meters are pretty much right on. We lose a fair amount of water. These projects, I think, are in large part, correct me if I'm wrong, Bo, designed to fix places where we lose water.
Yes, these are the projects for the first 5 years at least came directly from Arcadis study. And we did the first part of that with the fire flow improvements, and now we're into their next recommendation was to address areas of chronic line breakages. And so it's not only the area they recommend we fix, but we broke it up kind of the way they said if you want to phase it, do a whole street at a time. Don't, break it up beyond that. So it really worked out well for what we were trying to do as far as putting together a 5-year plan for them to look at. Beyond that, we have the 21-year plan that has many other projects to address moving forward. So,
Also, how's the public going to respond? I think people need to understand why this is necessary. And maybe they already do, but I suspect not. And no one's going to like it. And so is there anything in particular? I think she even mentioned in the plan, they said something about the public relations aspect of this, that we might need to talk about how you unfold this, how you prepare people for it. If you know it's coming in July, I'd want to know right now if it was coming in July, because that's not very far away, so that you can start preparing people.
well, I get that. I think that goes to Bill's point that we need to move forward because this would require an ordinance. So we can certainly talk about it prior to it being passed, but it'll take 2 readings of an ordinance to put it into place. So there'll be a process that we would have to go through before it was solid.
In the same ordinance, can we put, or do we have to do a separate ordinance to go from every 3 months to 2 monthly? Can we do that too at the same time? Because we are doing the pretty big increase.
I don't think that's in the ordinance anywhere. That's an operational thing as opposed to
So how would we
billing.
I think
implement
we
that?
would meet as the water board and
Right.
just decide to do that. It can just be a
That's more of a policy as opposed to the ordinance.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to forget that because we
Right.
kind of touched on it, but I
Yeah.
think that would be important to do at the same time,
Well, we have,
if possible.
right, we have one council member who's out
Yep.
with some medical things to attend to right now. Would you convey to Bob that if he wants to weigh in, I'd like to hear from him. And if we move quickly, he may not have a chance to be back here yet. So if he was willing to do something in writing, if he wanted to convey something, would that be okay?
I think so. I'll be happy to contact him.
Yeah, I mean, he may
I'll
not.
defer to our attorney as to how we can convey that to the council
You
members.
see where I'm going with this? I mean, this is a big decision.
Well, if he wants us to wait for him to be present, then that gives him an opportunity to communicate that. If he doesn't have a strong,
Yeah.
he may agree, and it may be, I think it's just a courteous to reach out to him. if that's within the law.
I don't think that's a problem.
I don't think so either.
And
I mean, we communicate about when we're gonna do meetings that way.
Right.
Through voting.
yeah, as far as when the discussion will happen is not a problem. It's if we delve into that discussion through that communication that we get an issue. And I think, and I'll bear the burden and throw it out there, but I think this is also part of a much larger decision that is ready or not to be made, depending on your position in terms of if we move forward with this plan, it includes purchasing meters and personnel structures and things that if we are going to continue to operate a system, we absolutely need to move forward with. And that decision hasn't been made.
But well, it's been made by the fact that we haven't made a decision to do something else. Do you think we need to formally, that we need to formally contact the bidders? If we were choosing to do this?
I'm just making sure that council keeps in mind that those proposals are on the table. We have had the feasibility study, viability study, I don't remember which one they ended up calling it. We've now had the rate study. It's absolutely up to the council whether you're ready for that discussion or not.
What's nice? And that, we have to have a full council for that, for
Well-
those types of discussions.
That could push, we don't know how far out that could push this.
We can begin this process. I'm not saying it's dependent upon that, but moving forward with the plan that we conveyed to MTAS was if we maintain the system, this is what we think we need to do. And putting ourselves in a position to do that is one thing. If we move into making major purchases and reorganizing and all of that ahead of that commitment, that
I understand. Would a resolution, could be voted up or down, be appropriate to entertain for the next meeting that says is the intent of the town of Signal Mountain to continue to maintain and operate its own water company? Would that be that step?
Has
Yes.
the viability committee completed their?
Yeah, every study's done. Well, I mean, there's a citizens group, that's a different thing, but that deals with that's a separate issue from this. You feeling?
I mean, I brought this
No,
point up
for this
because it needs to be determined how we move forward, you move forward on that decision.
I am comfortable requesting staff to draw that up as a resolution. A simple resolution that states it's our intent.
I'm not comfortable with that. We don't have a full council and we won't at the next meeting.
Anybody
Maybe we
else?
need to communicate with him and find out what his, I mean, he hasn't had the opportunity
He
to
hasn't
look
even
at
seen this.
the PowerPoint
Oh, he got
and
it.
the study. So,
And
but maybe over the next 2 weeks, he would.
So I'm saying it can be voted up or down.
But if he's not here to vote, then we're one less vote. So it can be voted up or down, but we don't have a full council voting on it.
Is it ever proper to take could I ask for a vote now on whether we should ask staff for this, to draw up a resolution on this for the next meeting? Harry? That seem parliamentary acceptable?
I don't think you have to have a full council to take a vote. So yes, I think you can ask for that.
I think that's a really big decision, and we've not done that on any other big decision in the last 2 years, and I think that we should not be making that exception because it's a decision you've already made. So I think we should wait until we have a full council. That's my opinion. But I'm obviously, I could be outnumbered.
Maybe not.
That's up to you.
We have a couple of things on the table. One is, we need to move forward. And one is, we can't move forward. And so
I'm not
that's
saying
what
not
we're
move
trying to
forward.
wrestle.
I'm saying I don't think we should vote on something like keeping or selling the water system without a member of our council here. I don't think we should do that. This has been a super controversial issue. We've had people show up in T-shirts, and now we've given no notice, and we're going to vote on whether or not we're going to have a resolution at the next meeting. I just disagree.
Well, this would be a notice, and it doesn't have to be the next meeting. It could be 2 meetings from now, but we have to discuss how we're going forward, which is what we're doing.
I understand the process. I'm
So
just
would you
stating
like
my
to
opinion.
not go forward?
No, I would not. I am not comfortable voting on that tonight.
What
for the
can,
resolution.
what can staff be doing to prepare us for
They can
either
prepare to
decision?
vote
Well,
on
how's that?
option B. About raising
Again-
the rates, because we got to do that anyway.
We can draft ordinances and prepare. Again, I'm not saying we can't move forward with what we discussed tonight in terms of the rate study and what that would do and all. We can begin to work on that.
Okay.
That's what, I
But-
mean, I don't think it
but
has
in
to be like
rel-
an all or nothing kind of thing, Amy.
But in
I think it's
relatively-
like preliminary, and then, the big votes, the ones that are more consequential can come later, but I think just to do some preliminary work to at
On
least
rate
get
study,
the,
I'm fine with. I'm not talking about that.
yeah, and I don't think that we should vote, I think we need more full transparency, time to communicate, whatever. But I'm also think that, we've got all of the questions to the answer, we've got the answers to the questions that we've been waiting for, and time is of the essence to some extent because we're going to have to increase the rates, and
I agree with you on that. I'm comfortable with voting on that.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable on voting on a resolution to keep the water system
Or sell it.
or sell it.
yeah.
Yeah, either one.
And the only reason I'm comfortable is, honestly, I never heard one person who was a proponent of selling the system. The vast majority, you mentioned the T-shirts and all that, of folks were proponents of keeping our system. And I certainly have a concern in selling it to at least one of the bidders, just based on experience with that bidder. So, yeah, I understand having a full council to make that decision, but I'm at least comfortable that if we choose to do otherwise, we've heard from a lot of people in the community who don't want to sell the system.
I agree.
We always have the option of tabling something. And I'd like to hear from Bob. That's how this whole thing started. I would like to hear from Bob. But we can't say or demand that we hear from Bob, or say or demand when he's going to be back. We can't. We don't have that. So that's why I would like to give him an opportunity to speak, even if he can't, be back quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we can
2
weigh.
weeks is not going to make or break it.
Right, and we can weigh whether or not we vote on what the next steps are. Because for me, the next steps aren't that. I won't be comfortable with voting to keep the system until we also lay out a plan on how you really explain this to the public. I think it needs some PR, just to prepare people, to let them know what's happening. And I know we've had a lot of stuff, but I think it needs to be in writing, it needs to be on the website, so it says, these are the meetings we had. This is this is where we are, and this is why we've come to this decision, just so that people understand that this isn't, we've seen it on everything. You think you've done everything, and then you get to the last minute, and people show up and say, I didn't know anything about this, right? And it's always
Well,
gonna
maybe we
happen.
need to put together like a white paper or a
That's right.
comprehensive, but not too comprehensive, but like a one sheet that is got, try to condense and distill this information and put it onto one sheet of paper that explains it, and that anybody can read it and publish it on the website and say, these are the results of the studies that we've conducted. It is our opinion, that rates are going to have to be increased. It's not just an opinion, it's mandatory, it's going to happen. And this is the process. So that it's kind of, people aren't going to read big, long reports. I mean, they're just not. So I think that needs to be part of the tactical communications plan.
I like that.
This is important enough that it does require that.
All in favor of Susanna, right? All right.
I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying the next step has to be making a decision on whether or not we sell the system.
That's what
I'm just saying, as we move forward with this, that's part of the process yet to happen. And very frankly, if we're going to keep the system, I want to get busy. I want to get to work. And we see from our fire and our police and our public works and if we identify something that we need to make better, we can do that. And I just want to get busy.
Sure. And I want to point it out to, maybe this isn't wise to do, but the rates would probably be lower if we sold. And if that's all that we're looking at, we should be extremely honest about that. So that's why I'm saying the reasons if you choose to keep are very important, that you explain why you did that. I mean, long-term wise. So that's another reason why I think you got to get to that decision and just do it.
I'm not opposed to getting to the decision. I just want to have a full council, and an issue is not controversial because there's a majority. It's because there's two sides of the story. So maybe you were approached with more that wanted to keep it because of, for whatever reason, and maybe I was approached for other reasons. I don't know where Bob is. He's not here to say. And so it is a controversial issue. It has came up in the election. It's come up every bit as much as the independent school district did. And if we had made a decision like that without a full council, people would have probably been recalled. And I'm being fair and honest. I don't think we make a decision like that without a full council. Even that step, because of it gives the impression of non-transparency. And that's something that everybody's been a big deal, had a real issue with. And I think you make a decision like that, and everybody is able to give their vote, then that's where it is. But I don't think we do that without 5 people here.
And I also think maybe short-term the rates wouldn't go up or increase, but we can't say for sure
5 years was
that a few years down the road that our rates would still be less if we sell.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, maybe in the short term they may not be, but, I think it's important to really be, clear about that too.
You have to know why you're doing
Which is
it.
why I think that's not something that should be done at the next meeting. I'm done. I'm off my soapbox. It's 8:30. After 2 hours, we all start to get
punchy.
So our next step for the next meeting is what?
I say we readdress it once, we don't know if we can hear from Bob or not, but at least we extend that effort. It gives 2 weeks for citizens to approach us. It gives us 2 weeks to put things out on social media, on the website. Look, we're getting closer to having this discussion and making a decision. But at least it allows the opportunity to get a 5-person council. And who knows, he could be miraculously, at the next meeting. Is everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Because I don't think we're putting it off, we're just going to wait to hear from Bob, and then it's on the agenda for the next meeting.
What's on the agenda for the next meeting?
Whether or not we're going to do option B or A or B.
Can we
Rate
vote on
increase.
option B or A, or any option, without having decided that we're keeping the water company?
Yes, that's what
How can
Lloyd
we
had
do
said.
that? You can vote on that?
You can vote on a rate increase any time. We could have done that
So
8 months ago. That's what Chris wanted to
if,
do.
if we voted on a rate increase, we'd be voting on a rate increase that's more than is necessary immediately.
We would be. And we can vote up or down.
Yes.
But at least we know, at least
Isn't
where
that true?
Bob is. We're an attempt to know where he is.
Base, you can, your question was, can you do that? And the answer is yes. It does complicate things, if the scenario is that you sell the system. Because at least one of the proposals is based on where the rate is set at the time the acquisition happens. So that could complicate it, but it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Okay. So,
So, to your point earlier, if something's on the agenda, you can choose not to address it. So, if you want this on the agenda as a discussion item, and also I can have first reading for the rate increase ordinance drafted. And if you just decide not to move forward with it, then you don't. If you do, we'll have it for first reading, and that will just be the first of 2 readings.
sure. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I like that.
You guys? All right, let's take a look at the agenda for the next meeting. Well, anybody have any other business?
Oh, I am meeting with Dr. Johnson and Kathy Lennon on Wednesday at 10 for the 2 items we talked about last time. In case anyone was curious, the time change for the middle high school, and, well, that's really the purpose of the meeting.
Excellent. I'd like to have us, and I think Boyd, we talked about this anyway, to be able to look at the peanut idea for 5 points. At least have as a discussion item.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice, see, 2 weeks from now, the ugly yellow sticks of contention will still be up on Stratford Way, as far as we know.
Probably.
Okay. How do we move forward with that? We take the sticks, if as you say, it's a test. When they come down, we're back to having the same problem we had before. So what would do you want council involved in this? I think council is involved in this now.
Nope. We always welcome your input.
Right.
As it was stated, as we saw through the speed bump thing, and again, we probably dropped the ball on some communications on this, but when you look at your options and try to figure out what to do, this was the one thing that we could try on a temporary basis. You can't temporarily put in a traffic circle.
Or a sidewalk.
And putting in actual speed tables is very expensive. That's not something you do on a temporary basis. This was kind of the one thing that we could just try. And there was suggestions up to how you do it if you want to try this out.
Okay.
So
I think one thing you might have missed is, I'm sure how much it was narrowed down to was based on some kind of a stat. It didn't leave enough room for strollers and walkers on either side. And I think if that element had been different, if the street really was wide enough.
strollers probably not, but
Walkers maybe.
walkers could navigate.
But unless the dogs
To the
know how to do
outside.
this. Yeah.
But again, that was the rationale, and that's what we were trying to accomplish. And it is ultimately going to need final resolution. What that means, we don't know yet, and that's what we're trying to determine.
Okay. would it be reasonable for you to put forth some possibles, or should we wait 2 meetings for that?
We need time to monitor what we put out.
Sorry.
We just put the delineators up, I think it was Thursday, so we have to have time to even see, you know, if it works. That's why I was saying we need like at least 3 weeks, maybe 4.
Okay.
And I talked to Chief Williams, he's gonna help us do the monitoring on that. I've had 2 people sit today for about 30-minute time periods to count traffic and look at behavior. It's hard for us to tell if they're speeding or not. And then it was hard to tell if people slowed down because I was sitting at Malcolm and it probably looked like a policeman. And so when they looked over and saw me sitting there, then they would slow down. So need to do an unmarked car, I guess. So we just need time to evaluate what we've got.
Do we have anybody willing to be the crazy neighbor with a speed gun?
I've been the crazy lady, I promise you, and oddly enough, for some reason, that may not fit myself, that you are welcome to come sit in my yard, because you're right, if you sit there, you're slowing down. And in all honesty, I think it's worse with the big buildings, because they are, they're coming through and slowing down, but it's this, they're gunning it through the very area that we are actually concerned about.
Okay.
Tonight was about aesthetics, just
Yeah.
But that's not what the permanent solution will look like.
No, and I understand.
I just want.
All right. Yeah, well, let's,
You're welcome to use our driveway or not.
okay. Let's let them get good data, so we have some empirical data to move forward to whatever the next thing is. So that's not, anybody else have any other thing you want to see on the agenda for next time?
We will have the resolution that we discussed at the prior meeting for the post-employment benefits, continuing to allow retirees to carry health insurance as long as they cover the premium. We have to have that by the end of the month, so we'll have that on the agenda for the 25th. It's just a resolution saying that we will continue that practice, but we will have the ability to change that later if we want.
We talked about this at another meeting, and maybe this isn't for next time, but we talked about they're working on our website now, so that's happening. We need white paper type things on some of the projects that are open. I mean, it would be so nice when somebody asks, what's going on with James Boulevard, to say, well, go read this. This will give you a synopsis on that. Or what's happening with sidewalks? Well, go read this. Here's a good synopsis of that. I'm not saying we need to have that by the next meeting, but I'd like to talk about how we go about getting that. Is that the kind of thing that you assign Loretta to write about the Old Town sidewalks, or?
It's something that all of our department heads would need to do on a regular basis if we were going to post that. And I necessarily have objection to that, but.
Or I'm wondering, is there a better way? I'd like to have a discussion about how we can, if we don't participate as a town in the rebuilding of the website, we'll just have a new website with the same, same stuff it had on it before, so we've got to get active with that. All right. Boyd, do you have any other thing?
No, sir.
All right, we are adjourned. Motion to adjourn? Motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Done.